everyone, have you ever asked an AI a question about a super niche topic, something you know it probably doesn't know, and you just expect it to say, hey, I'm not sure. But instead, it just fires back an answer. And not just any answer, right? A remarkably confident, highly detailed, and completely made up answer. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down exactly why that actually happens. So let's just dive right into the actual mechanics of digital hallucination. There's this really fascinating illusion at play here. Think about it. When you ask a real person a question they don't know the answer to, what do they usually do? They pause, maybe scratch their head, and just admit they don't know. But AI rarely says, I don't know. Instead, it pulls off this incredible Wizard of Oz effect. It sounds so incredibly certain, so articulate, and honestly, so convincingly human that it makes its fabricated answers incredibly deceiving. You read this perfectly structured paragraph, and your brain just automatically assumes, well, if it sounds that confident, it must be factually accurate. But as we're about to see, that assumption is a total trap. Moving on to section 1, why it actually happens, or the engine reveal. Okay, here is the absolutely crucial point we need to understand right out of the gate. An AI model isn't actually looking anything up. This is probably the single biggest misconception out there about how these tools work. You know, when you type a prompt into that little text box, it's supernatural to imagine the AI acting like a super-powered search engine. You picture it rapidly flipping through some massive, verified database of facts, finding the right entry, and just reading it back to you. But guys, that is literally not what's happening. There is no giant filing cabinet of verified truths that the system is checking. So, if it's not looking things up, what exactly is it doing? Well, the actual mechanics really boil down to a pretty simple two-step process. Step 1. The system learns patterns from enormous amounts of text, and I mean vast oceans of data. It studies how words relate to each other, how sentences are built, and how language naturally flows. Then comes Step 2. When you ask it a question, it uses all those learned patterns to predict the statistically likely next words. And that's pretty much the whole shebang. It is fundamentally a cold statistical machine calculating word patterns. It's stringing together the most probable sequence of words based on its training. It's not fetching a fact, it's just calculating a probability. Which brings us to the exact vulnerability in this whole mechanical process. Because the AI is entirely focused on predicting the next statistically likely word, nothing in that process automatically checks whether the resulting sentence is actually true. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. Fact verification simply does not exist in the prediction step. The system doesn't have like an internal referee standing by with a red flag, cross-referencing its statistically generated sentences against objective reality. Nope, it just predicts, generates, and moves on. This leads us perfectly into section 2, fluency versus accuracy, which is the real paradox set up here. This is exactly where our human expectations get totally crossed. Let's look at fluency first. Fluency is the AI's ability to predict the most statistically likely words so that the sentence sounds natural, authoritative, and grammatically flawless. On the other side, we have accuracy. Accuracy is actually providing verified true information. Now, as human beings, we usually link these two together, right? Like if someone speaks fluently and confidently about a subject, we just naturally assume they're accurate. But within the architecture of an AI model, fluency and accuracy are genuinely two completely separate things. They are entirely different mechanical goals. And this really reveals the AI's true priorities. The model is fundamentally built to optimize for fluency. Its primary directive, the main thing it has been heavily trained and calculated to do, is to make the sentence flow naturally. It wants to give you the most statistically satisfying string of text possible. So when it's forced into a corner where it has to choose between maintaining its smooth, confident linguistic flow or stopping to awkwardly admit a lack of factual data, the system defaults to what it was optimized for, fluency. It will confidently generate a statistically likely string of words, even if those words describe a perfectly formatted legal citation that doesn't actually exist, or some historical event that literally never happened. These are the most common patterns of fabrication we see, and they look absolutely flawlessly real, because at the end of the day, fluency is the prime objective. All right, section 3, consequence, not a bug. Let's totally reframe how we think about this. Out in the industry, this phenomenon is known as a hallucination. A hallucination happens when an AI confidently provides fabricated details because it is predicting likely words rather than verifying facts. You see, the AI isn't maliciously lying to you, it's simply executing its core function, predicting words based on patterns, so incredibly well that it successfully generates a completely plausible, yet entirely fictional reality. And because it relies heavily on these word patterns, the fabrications themselves actually have predictable patterns. You'll often spot them as highly plausible but subtly contradictory details or totally invented sources that sound perfectly academic. Which brings us to the biggest takeaway of this entire explainer. Listen to this. It's not a bug that shows up occasionally. It's a direct consequence of how these models fundamentally work. This is absolutely crucial. When an AI hallucinates, it is not malfunctioning. The machine isn't broken. Actually, scratch that. The machine is doing exactly what it was designed to do, calculate the most probable next word. The hallucination is just an inherent structural feature of the machine's design. As long as the engine underneath relies on statistical prediction rather than factual lookup, these confident fabrications are going to remain a permanent structural reality. So, if hallucinations are baked right into the very architecture of artificial intelligence, it leaves us with a pretty profound question. As these models become more and more perfectly fluent, are we ever going to be able to tell the difference between a synthetic truth and a beautifully articulated lie? Like I mentioned, there are common patterns to these fabrications and very specific ways to identify them before they trick you. Want to learn exactly how to catch them? Just comment the word hallucinate down below and let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay curious and always question the confidence in the machine.